Recording this computer. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I have had a few apologies received. I'm not sure who else may be joining us, but I'll keep an eye out for that. Graham, as club president, do you want to say a few words before I pass over to our speaker tonight, Mark? We can't hear you very well. I think your volume's turned down. You're not on mute, but we can't hear you. No, still can't hear you. All right, we'll crack on, I think. So, anyhow, as I say, I'll keep an eye to see who else joins us. Hopefully, we may have a few more. But thankfully, Mark has agreed that we can record tonight's meeting, so we can share it to those members who can't join us tonight. It's gives me great pleasure to introduce Mark from Southwest Blood Bikes, a charity I've wanted to try and get along to a Rotary Club to speak for a while, because I know there's a similar organisation who do similar sort of work who I did try to get some years ago who wanted to charge an extortionate amount, but I know when my wife is a community first responder suggested the Southwest Blood Bikes that wasn't going to be an issue, so it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Mark to speak to us tonight and tell us about the great valuable work they do in our local community. So Mark, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Darren, and good evening to everybody. So we are Southwest Blood Bikes. We are a volunteer organisation. We have no paid staff at all. So totally run by volunteers. Our purpose is we are an emergency out of hours courier for the NHS and hospices. Our aims are to save lives, to improve patient outcomes, but also, and very importantly, we aim to save the NHS and hospices money, which they can then use instead of paying private couriers and taxi companies. They can actually use that on patient care instead, which is obviously very important. So thank you for having us along tonight. And I'm going to start the presentation. So we are the official nationwide association of blood bikes group for Devon. So every county has an official group. That means we've met and been audited by them and meet their membership standards. And our governing body, NAB, as we call them, have actually commissioned this short film, which I'm going to play for you, which, rather than me rabbiting on, will tell you a lot more about what blood bikes do with moving pictures. So we'll have a look at that now. Hopefully the sound's going to work, but if it doesn't work, Darren, just give me a shout.
There is no sound at the moment, Mark.
No?
No.
You getting sound now?
No.
It's a shame. So that doesn't work then. So we'll have to do without the film, which is a shame. But we'll talk a little bit about how blood bikes started then. So the first volunteer blood bike group was founded in 1962 by a lady called Margaret Ryerson. And she's pictured there with a trusty aerial motorcycle and sidecar. She started the group with her husband in Wallington in Surrey to service the London hospitals by moving blood from the blood bank at Tooting, where it still is today, around to the London hospitals. And the principles that she started her group with, we carry on today. So a free service, emergency out of hours couriers. In 2020, that small movement that started in Wallington had grown to the fact that there are 36 member groups around the UK. In total, the NAB groups totaled 4,500 volunteers, and we did over 163,000 jobs for the NHS around the country. So we have non-negotiable rules in Southwest Blood Bikes. The non-negotiable rules that we have, we're all volunteers. Not a single person gets a penny of benefit from being in this organisation. And that includes, the trustees, which is myself and 4 other people who are our trustees. We make no charge to our service users, and we have a policy of complete transparency on accounting. Unfortunately, the other group that you mentioned, you'll have perhaps picked up on the press coverage that they've caught a bit of a cold on the regulation front with accounting. Our policy is such that anybody who wants to see anything can ask us at any time. Anyone's welcome to visit us, look at the accounts, and we've written all of this into our constitution as well. This is fundamental to why our group was formed. We wanted to do things in a different way to the group that went before us, and people find us we had somebody wanting to sponsor us a few months ago, and they made the mistake actually of asking for a lot of information about our accounts. And he was somewhat surprised by the amount of information he got. And he said he's never seen anything so detailed ever, and he loved it. But so we are a close-knit team of volunteers. Within our group, we have 71 people now volunteering for us, which is a lot. But I still describe us as being a blood bike group comprised of a group of friends who volunteer for the NHS. Very, very nice atmosphere within the group. All of our riders are advanced motorcyclists, so that means that we all have to pass either the Institute of Advanced Motorists or ROSPA's advanced motorcycling course. So nobody gets onto our bikes without being an advanced rider. As well as the motorcyclists, and we're not just bikers either. About half of our operational volunteers don't have a motorbike license at all, and we actually do run a fleet of cars, so half of our volunteers are actually volunteer car drivers for us. The other important people are the controllers. They form the vital link between the NHS sites who are using us and our riders. They work from home, manning the phones. We've got a fairly simplistic but very effective routing system. We track the riders as well, so the controllers track us at night. So if I'm out at night and coming back over Dartmoor, it's reassuring to know that someone's following my movement on the tracker, because in the event I fell off somewhere, if I don't arrive where I'm meant to be, or I appear to have stopped somewhere in a strange location without giving a reason for that, it's like someone's looking down on you from above, and that's your safety net. So the controllers do a very important job. And we've got support function of a treasurer and fundraisers. So we've got 42 riders and drivers, and the other people are all either controllers or fundraisers, etc. We're volunteers, but we're very keen to work to professional standards. Our riders and drivers are all vetted. We carry out driving license checks, we take up references, we carry out DBS checks, and we have robust code of conduct policies in force. All of our riders do a specialised good delivery practice course. That's actually mandatory for blood bike groups to do. And that involves elements of work from the NHSBT, elements of training on the safe handling of blood products and hazardous materials, and good delivery practice, which actually covers the handling of medications, etc. as well. All of our riders are uniformed, and we all carry official identification at all times when on duty. So volunteers, yes, professional standards as well as. Personally, and you'll find this odd from somebody who runs a blood bike group, I don't like the words blood bikes. It's a very poor representation of what we do now. When Margaret Ryerson started in 1962, they were just doing whole blood and running it around the hospitals. What we carry is vast. Whole blood and blood products, yes, but we're also doing pathology samples, blood test samples, smear tests, medication, medical equipment, medical notes, donor breast milk, COVID test kits, you name it, we do it. So if it's something that's required by the NHS out of hours, they will call us to help with it. So the old title blood bikes is a bit of a misnomer. We've moved on a lot from that now. And, we don't only move things between hospitals. Quite often our work can see us going to patients' homes as well. So we will on occasion visit patients at home if we're delivering medication or collecting tests. If the district nurse has been and taken a blood test from a patient, she may well leave that at the patient's house and call a blood bike to come and pick it up and take it to labs. So what don't we carry? Well, we have to be careful not to overload the bikes. That's the first picture there. At the end of the day, the hospitals have to bear in mind that we are predominantly a bike-driven or car-driven service, so we need to be able to carry things in the panniers or on the top box of the bike. Medical equipment, we do carry medical equipment, but again, it's got to fit into the cars or the van that we have. We don't carry infectious substances. There are two types of infectious substances. We are legally allowed to carry Class B infectious substances, which is, some pretty nasty stuff in there. But there's a higher class, Class A, which we will not carry. And we won't carry things like X-ray isotopes and that sort of thing. Nor do we move patients. So even though we have a fleet of cars, we have been asked if we would help by collecting patients and that sort of thing. We don't get involved in that at all. We're not an ambulance service, and we would actually not be able to do that. And we don't take patients' effects. So I can tell you that we actually received a call when I was one of the night riders, and I'm glad the controller didn't ring me up to ask me to do it. We actually got a call at 1 o'clock in the morning not so long ago. I won't name the hospital, but it starts with D and it's in Plymouth. But we'll protect the anonymous. And the ward actually phoned our emergency helpline at, I think it was 1:30 in the morning, to tell us that they'd actually discharged a patient earlier in the day, and could we send a blood bike out because he'd left his slippers and his spectacles on the ward and needed them at home, which we politely declined. It's not quite our thing. But, if it's urgent and it's small enough for us to carry, we will always try and help. So who uses our services? Well, there's the hospitals. There's NHSBT, who are the blood and transplant side of the NHS. They get involved with us. Hospices in Plymouth. We do a lot of work for St Luke's hospices. We support GP surgeries to an extent as well. They've got this thing called extended access that some of you may have heard of. Extended access actually means that you can get an appointment late night at GPs up until 8 o'clock in the evening when they normally close at 5. The only way that the surgeries can actually do that is to have a courier service available to them if the GP wants to take a blood test or urine sample. So we do support GP surgeries because their NHS courier service closes at 5 o'clock. If they've got a patient who's gone in for an evening appointment and they're a bit concerned about the patient and they'd like to do a test straight away, the GP surgery can call us and we will actually take the sample up to the labs. Specialist clinics, dental hospitals, the NHS Central Record Service as well up at Bush Park in Plymouth. They will use us on occasion. So if a patient's admitted into hospital and the doctor treating them wants some information on the patient that is aged and not on the computer system, most people still have paper records attached to them. And we will go up and get the records from Bush Park and take it down to the ward in the hospital where they're treating the patient. And pharmacies, occasionally NHS pharmacies will ask us to collect if a patient's been discharged home from hospital, but their meds weren't ready. We may get a call from the pharmacy to actually pick up the meds at the hospital and take it to the patient's home. So there's quite a lot of different people who use our service. The pandemic was an interesting time. We did a lot of work moving COVID-19 tests around from various places. We also ran a scheme which is still ongoing, where we visit patients at home. So if they have a member of staff who has phoned in sick with COVID samples, it's key to the NHS to return that member of staff to the front line as soon as possible. But they can't take a risk of that person coming in. They might just have a cold, or they might have COVID. So if a member of staff feels unwell, they will call us. They'll call into the absence centre at Derriford Hospital, and they will ask us to take a PCR test kit to the patient's home. We wait while, at a safe distance, I hasten to add, we wait while they perform the test on themselves, and we will then take that as part of our job back to Derriford for testing. So if it's, a key member of staff, like an intensive care nurse, they can tell straight away then whether that person's safe to return to the front line or whether they need to stay away from the hospital. And we also do something similar for people who are coming in for elective heart surgery. Those patients, we will actually sometimes take the tests to them at home because they're too unwell to travel into the hospital themselves. During the pandemic, we delivered literally thousands of medication deliveries to shielding patients. The pharmacies were suddenly faced with hundreds and hundreds of patients who normally came in for their medication, suddenly shielding at home, and a lot of them just couldn't cope. And we did several thousand deliveries during lockdown, all done on our bikes with volunteers. I myself did 863 deliveries during lockdown to people at home. And that's just one bike, and we're running 12 bikes in our group. So you can imagine how busy we were. And during lockdown, we ran a 24/7 operation. And I've got to say, as a group, we mostly funded the fuel and that ourselves out of our own pockets as volunteers, because for the 2 years COVID was in play, we were unable to do any fundraising realistically. So it was a very busy, interesting, but quite difficult time for us. Areas we cover: Plymouth team cover Plymouth, the South Hams, and up to Tavistock and Oakhampton. So we've got 4 separate teams that work around the county. Torbay team is the team I ride for. Torbay, they do a bit of work in Exeter and national relay work. North Devon team, North Devon Hospital down to RD&E is a regular run, and they do a lot of runs from North Devon into Bristol as well, working with the Bristol blood bikes in relay. We've hoped for 3 years to open a team in Exeter, and we've really struggled to get the funding together to get them 2 blood bikes on the road and a response car. And I'm pleased to say we're just starting the team. We've just started it last week. So that finishes our expansion as a charity. So we've now got all 4 teams up and running. Exeter is really just in the early stages at the moment. We've got plenty of volunteers. We've managed to raise enough funds to get 2 blood bikes into Exeter, which are up there now. And we're just putting volunteers through their training. In fact, this week, we've got more training going on in terms of assessed rides with our rider training specialist and the health and safety courses that the riders have to do. So within a week or 2, our Exeter team will be fully operational. And that concludes our expansion plans, because the charity is as big as it needs to be then. So when do we do what we're doing? Well, if you look at our website and our service level agreements, we actually work Monday to Friday, 5 in the evening till 7 in the morning. And we work 24 hours at weekends and bank holidays. But actually, we're moving on from there now, because we are blessed in having quite a few retired volunteers. And whilst we're not officially publishing it, we are really running a 24-hour-a-day operation now. We tend to try and have a volunteer from each team on call during the daytime, and the hospitals know that if they call us, we will, in most cases, be able to help them. So we are transitioning at the moment to a 24/7 operation. So our vehicles, I apologise, this slide's a little bit out of date. We operate 9 livery blood bikes. Actually, we operate 12 now with the extra team. And we have another bike going on the road in Plymouth, which should be with us any day. They're a mix of larger bikes. So we've got Yamaha FJR 1300s, which we've now got 5 of those. We've got 3 BMWs and a couple of Hondas thrown into the mix as well. And we've got a new Yamaha Tracer 900 arriving next week. Well, it should be here this week, but it doesn't look like they're going to deliver it till next week now. So we've got 12 bikes around the county. And we've also got 3 response cars as well, the Skoda Scout that you see down the bottom there. So the cars are used for larger loads, but also when the weather's adverse. If our riders don't want to ride, if it's not safe for them to ride because of poor weather, we have the 3 cars available as well. An interesting fact about the bikes is of the 12 bikes that we actually have as a charity, 7 of the bikes have actually been purchased by the volunteers themselves. So our volunteers give a lot more than time. They've actually clubbed together and bought these bikes themselves, which is amazing, really. You know, in the early days when we were really struggling to get the charity up and running, people just said, we need a, you know, you need a new bike, I'll buy one, which is, you know, astounding. So what do we carry on a typical bike? Well, they've all got rigid panniers. Most of them have got the specialist metal tray that you see at the back here. That's for carrying specialised blood boxes and donor breast milk boxes, which are refrigerated. We have specialist Daniels containers, which we carry in either pannier, which are specifically for carrying hazardous material. We do a lot of donor breast milk runs, and they fit on the rack at the back. We also have to carry spill kits, receipt books and pens, gloves, hand gel, masks, etc. for the riders. Every one of the bikes is fitted with a sat-nav system, and we have tyre depth gauges and pressure gauges as well. So we do carry quite a bit of equipment on the bikes that we need to do the job. So Nationwide Association of Blood Bikes, we replaced Devon Freewheelers as the official NAB member in 2020, when sadly they ceased to meet the required membership standards. We are members because we have recognised standards of operation and training. Being a member of NAB means we are part of a nationwide organisation, and we work in relay with our other groups. The furthest job that we've done from Plymouth is to Chester. We've done a lot to Birmingham. Being a NAB member means that if we get a job to go to Chester, I can then phone my colleagues at the Bristol Blood Bikes. We will arrange to relay with them at Bridgewater Services. And then from after that, it will go to 7 freewheelers, and 7 freewheelers will take it up to Birmingham Blood Bikes, and so on and so forth. So we can really get anything anywhere in the country very quickly. As if that is not quick enough, we then have the Civil Air Patrol at our behest as well. They are a specialist NAB group of very wealthy blood bikers, because all of the members of the Civil Air Patrol actually own their own aircraft. And we can, if necessary, and we really do need to move something quickly, call on those guys to help out. It's not something we do often, but we have done one job to Derriford when Derriford needed something urgently, that came down from Newcastle upon Tyne. and it ended up being brought down by a Civil Air Patrol member in his own aircraft, and he landed at a private airfield in Cornwall. Our bike was there to meet him and then took the product onto Derriford. So that is something that we can do. And being membership of NAB, it's a quality mark, and it means we're trusted by healthcare professionals. So our service is totally free of charge. The out of hours cost of a taxi or courier ranges from 20 to 90 pounds, for the jobs we're doing, depending on the time of day. RD&E, we've started, the Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital are telling me that one of their courier firms, if they move something from RD&E up to Southmead in Bristol out of hours, is charging £240 a call out. Well, we're now, as of the 6th of March, when we started the RD&E work, we're now doing that for them free of charge. We estimate that as a charity, we're saving the NHS in Devon somewhere between £250,000 every year. And we're doing that with an expenditure. Our expenditure just got the account signed off today with our auditors for the last financial year. We're doing that on a £62,000 a year budget. So there's a clear financial benefit to the NHS. Hospitals can have faith that we're going to be there for them. Taxis and couriers are not always reliable, not always available out of hours. And, at the end of the day, our riders are properly trained in the good manufacturing process and the good delivery practice course. And they're all advanced riders and drivers. What are our costs? Well, a basic motorcycle, a blood bike, actually, they're running at about 15,500 now. We have been told that to meet the latest requirements, we have to buy a specialist NAB machine, and they're about £15,500. Plus, there's all the equipment. You've got to also factor in tyres, servicing and repairs, fuel, vehicle insurance. Those are our main costs. And incidental small expenses, public liability insurance, premises, printing and media, very, very small costs to us on premises, because the bikes are generally based at volunteers' homes, or we've got free premises in Plymouth that we use. So we don't pay out money on rent. So the big costs are actually, all of the money really is spent on providing and maintaining the fleet. As a registered charity, we must raise our own funds. We're quite old-fashioned blood bike groups in doing that. We do that by physical collections in public areas, and any of you in Plymouth might have seen our volunteers at Morrison's in Plymstock last Saturday. Support from community groups, support from sponsorships, online giving via the PayPal Giving Fund, and also grant applications. But we also need practical support, such as people who help us service the vehicles, places to store vehicles and equipment, and also various equipment needed to provide our service. The biggest asset to us, though, is our people, and we're always looking out for volunteers, riders or drivers, controllers, fundraisers and admin assistants. So if you know anybody who might be interested in joining us, please get them to get in touch. We are a friendly team. We have regular social meetups as well as just working. And we never forget, although I'm a trustee of the charity and hold the position of chairperson, this charity is owned and operated by its volunteers. And the way in which we run it, each team has a team manager. And once every month, we have what we call a team breakfast, when all the volunteers are able to come along, have a social breakfast in a cafe somewhere. And at that point, they can talk about any ideas that they have about how they would like to do things differently, flag any concerns, come up with fundraising ideas, but also just have a good social get together as part of that as well. So we're on Facebook as Southwest Blood Bikes. Please give our page a follow and a share. We're also on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we have a website at swbb.org.uk, which you can have a look, find out more information on us. And that really is the end of my presentation, as we've been cut short by sadly not being able to have the video. So I'd like to open it to you now. And has anybody got any questions at all that they'd like to ask about what we do?
Well, I'm just unmuting myself, but I'm just seeing everyone's view here. Mark, you actually answered quite a few of my questions, but one question I'd just like to know is, you mentioned about some of the long relays you've had to do. How long would it take to do a sort of relay run from Plymouth up to, was it, you said Chester, I think, wasn't it the furthest you've done?
Yeah,
How long would that sort of
I think it's about 6 or 7 hours. We did 2 last week into London. So yeah, it's they can be quite long jobs, but you know, the key thing about the relays, being part of the NAB chain of blood bikes, means that we're not doing the whole journey. So we have handover points. There are several set handover points in the county. So if something was to go from Derriford up country or to come back down country, we'll meet at Bridgewater Services. So you can pretty much bet if you're ever out and about and you see 2 blood bikes in a motorway service area, they're on a relay. So, and the other key thing about that is I only have so many bikes and so many volunteers. And if I was to send one of my Plymouth bikes off to Chester, I've lost him for a whole shift and beyond. Whereas if I just send him to Bridgewater, he's gone for a couple of hours, and a couple of hours later we'll be back in Plymouth and able to respond to another call if it comes in. So by using the relay service, you're keeping the riders in the local area ready to respond to other calls. But the package is still in safe hands. It's handled by people that are trained to and signed up to the same standards. And we know with all certainty it's actually going to get to the destination safely.
On that, do you have time controls like HGV drivers do, so you can only do so many hours on the road at a time?
We don't, no, but I have rules on it, which I instill. You know, if a rider has been out for 5 hours, I consider that's enough. Within each group on each day, we have a backup rider. And if I feel that a rider's done too much, or the controller feels that the rider's done too much, we will take them off the road. And they will be told to come in. Some of
personal control.
Yeah, like in the organisation, we have some superheroes within it who like to feel they could go on forever and do everything. And those people, we will forcibly say, you've got to come in now. We're sending the reserve rider out. You've done enough. And that's not just about time in the saddle. You also have to think about the type of work they're doing. And you also have to think about the weather conditions. So if it's particularly cold or it's particularly hot, you know, I mean, my body armor with my helmet and the full Kevlar body armor that we wear and the heavy duty leathers or textile suits, you know, I'm pushing the best part of 15 kilo of extra weight around. You can't breathe very easily in them. So in the hot weather, I'm very mindful to bring people in when I think their time is up. If they've done a lot of running about here, there and everywhere, we will stop them. You know, at any point, the rider can say, I've had enough, send out the reserve rider. But equally, we put a brake on it, and 5 hours really is enough for a rider to ride in any one shift.
Quality volunteer management.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I have a moral duty and a legal duty as a trustee to do the right thing by our volunteers. As I say, some of them do need saving for themselves, because we've all got the hard man who can carry on and do 12 hours, and that's not safe. And we will stop them when we feel that they've done enough. We will actually call them in and say, no, the reserve rider's going out. And at any point during their shift, any of our riders can call the reserve rider. They'll just say to the controller, I'm starting to feel a bit tired, or don't feel well, or I'm too cold, I'm soaking wet and I need to change of clothes. At that point, we just go to the reserve rider and go, you're on. So in Plymouth, we tend to have 2 bikes out every night, but there's always a third with a reserve rider that can step in at a minute's notice if necessary. And we try and replicate that in all of the other teams as well.
So your bikes, where Mark, you say like in Plymouth, you've got sort of 2 on call during the night. Are they sort of just waiting at home, waiting to be paged, or do they sort of show someone waiting for?
No, so generally speaking, what happens is the riders take the bikes home. So the unit, we've got 2 units actually in Plymouth where we keep the bikes. We've got one down in Mill Bay, which is where our registered office is. I don't know if you know Joe Bell Bathrooms in Mill Bay, out on the Mill Bay Road. We've got a unit within that compound there where we keep 3 blood bikes. And one of the response cars, and ISAR3 Limited, who are up in Roborough. We also keep a couple of bikes up there as well, which are spare bikes for the fleet. We keep those up there. But what will happen is our riders will come down, pick up the bike from Joe Bell's unit, and keep that at home. And generally, the riders will sign up for 3 consecutive nights. So they do a couple of nights as primary rider, and then they do a night or 2 as the reserve rider. But we chop and change depending on people's availability. It's a bit of a dark art trying to put our rotors together. We're trying to fit in everybody's, commitments that they have to other things. But yeah, so generally you do a night or 2 as first rider, and then a night or 2 as the reserve rider, and they keep the bikes at home and just bring them back when their shift is ended.
Yep, Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself there, Jeff. You're on mute, if you press a space button, that's it.
That's it, he's there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Jeff. Good evening.
I live in Saltash, the other side of the river. Are you able to come across the river?
Yes and no. Technically, Saltash is covered by Cornwall Blood Bikes, our sister group of, they're part of the same group as us. They're another NAB member. It depends on the circumstances, really. If it was to take something from Saltash to Trelisk, no. Cornwall Blood Bikes would want to cover that themselves. But Saltash and Torpoint are funny places from a point of view. They're in a different county, but actually all the people from there, their healthcare needs are taken care of Derriford normally. So if we have an agreement with with Cornwall Blood Bikes that we will not trouble them. If there's something in Saltash and it's a sample or something to come back to Derriford, we will go and do that. That's not a problem. But we work very well with Cornwall. It's our sister group. We work very well with them. And indeed, we've supported them in the last, when we were doing the cardiac patients, when we had a huge influx of those needing COVID testing. Cornwall Blood Bikes couldn't cover those during the day. And we had an agreement with them. He said, well, we'll come into Cornwall and help you and cover those.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What we mustn't do as a NAB group is hold fundraising events in Cornwall. So if we rocked up at a bike show in Saltash and started fundraising on their patch, that's when it gets a bit emotional, as you would imagine in charities, But yeah, Torpoint and Saltash, generally we will cover if it's coming back into our area.
Thank you.
And we of course do relays. Sorry, just on the relays with Cornwall. Obviously things do come down to Trelisk from up country as well. So how that would work is we would meet the Bristol Blood Bikes up at Bridgewater, and we then come down. There's a little car park just before the Tamar Bridge. Just at the entrance to the bridge, we will meet Cornwall Blood Bikes there, hand over to them, and they will then take it on to Trelisk. So they're part of the relay system as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Just asking about your fundraising in Exeter. I've got a couple of contacts with groups in Exeter, so if you could send me details of the fundraiser up there, I might be able to promote your organisation with them.
Yeah, that would be very kind. We've only just started fundraising in Exeter. because, you know, up until the 6th of March, we didn't have an operational group there. But we're now working. We've signed our service level agreement with RD&E, so we will be starting to fundraise in that area. We do try and work in an ethical manner, and as we weren't providing a service to RD&E before the 6th of March, we didn't fundraise in Exeter, because I'm not going to take money from people we're not providing a service to. But yeah, Exeter now, we've just put a fundraise. We've got recruited 2 fundraisers in Exeter, and I'd be interested to hear about we'd like that.
If you want to send me, I was going to say, Ron, if Mark, if you want to send me the details about, I can pass it on to Ron when you send it through to me.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Ron?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
I do know two or three organisations that last time I heard had some spare cash.
Yeah, super. Yeah, I mean, we are really grateful for the support of community organisations. You know, that's where a lot of our money comes from, because you know, any organisation that's contributing is paying a part in the process. And, you know, be under no illusions, you know, our riders have, you know, a lot of what we do is urgent. But, you know, I can point to several occasions in the last few months where we know 100% we've saved a patient's life. You know, and that is the difference that our volunteers make. So it's, and we can only do that with the support of the community behind us. I certainly can't afford to fund it myself. God knows we tried in the early days.
It's like starting any charity. That's what happens. You end up putting your pocket to get it started, and once it's running, hopefully you smile.
I just think it's astonishing that, you know, I think it's astonishing that 7 of our bikes were actually bought by the volunteers in the early days, which is, you know, amazing, really. I've been involved with several charities before, and I've never seen generosity from the membership like that we have from our members. It's quite an enlightening experience. Any other questions about what we do?
Seeing none by the looks of it. I think Graham's still having audio problems. So, Mark, it was my show just to thank you ever so much for your time this evening for a great presentation. Shame we couldn't get the video to work earlier on, but I think what you've told us, you've enlightened us with the work that you guys do. And like Ron said, I'm sure there's some ways, even if it's a club we can't directly help, we've got contacts who may be able to help in some ways to be a valuable service you're doing here in Devon. So thank you ever so much for your time this evening.
Darren, with regard to the video, it is available on YouTube.